Меня зовут Валерий Шевченко. Я Master of Arts in Sociology. Ладно. Я очень рад вас всех сегодня видеть здесь. Я никогда не делал секции на конференциях, я немножко волнуюсь. Вот. И сегодня у нас в гостях, так скажем, в качестве эксперта выступит профессор Дэвид Бёрн, почетный профессор университета Дарима. Да. Он занимается исследованиями того, что называется social complexity studies, с позиции теории сложности. И сегодня, как вы могли понять из названия нашей секции, «Философский реализм в социальной теории. Вопросу математизации». Половина докладов, ну не половина, но в общем какая-то часть докладов будет больше связана с философской стороной вопроса, какая-то с математической стороной вопроса. И, собственно, сначала я в первом докладе в своем я расскажу некоторые базовые эпистемологические вопросы, в рамках которых мы будем уже обсуждать возможности математического приложения математических методов к изучению социальной теории. Вот. Дэвид будет комментировать доклады. Вот. Не знаю еще, что нужно в таких случаях говорить. Вот. Поэтому я просто начну свой доклад, и он будет на английском языке, если никто не против. Окей. Так. Let me... It's okay. I will sit here, okay? Thank you. So, what kind of realism social theory needs? Quite tricky question, I guess. And to start, we will a little bit discuss subject-object relations and three paradigms of social theory drawn from Andrew Say's book, Method of Social Science. And he starts from saying that the first paradigm of social theory is positivism, where we have some language community, which is the community of scientists, which have shared beliefs and shared communicative devices, shared language, in order to they use it, and in order to know the objectively existing reality, the object which is society. In this paradigm, it is supposed to be independent from cognition, independent from our experiences, and so on. So the main idea is that there is some language community, there is some objectively existing thing that is society, and the purpose of all this endeavor is to try to grasp the raw data of the objectively existing raw data and to transport it into knowledge. So do you see all the scheme, what does it mean? So the dotted line, that circled dotted line represents the boundary of language community. The letters S represent knowing subjects within the language community, and the line with dots between these knowing subjects represents social relations. Next, the next paradigm he's talking about is the paradigm of interpretivism, which might be illustrated by theories of Max Weber, social interactionism, Chicago School, and so on. Here, the one major difference from the previous paradigm is that here we have two language communities. One language community, which is on the left, is the community of scientists, which study society. The next, the language community which is on the right, represented with letters O, is the community of studied social group. So here we have two language communities where one language community studies another language community by establishing some meaningful relationship between them, and to know the meanings which the members of the second community studied assign to their actions, to their beliefs, to their interactions, and so on. So the main idea of interpretivism, in words of Andrew Sayre, is that there are two social groups that one of which studies the meanings of actions and meanings of the meanings of the second social group. Here you can see the two lines between the communities, where one line is a dotted line and one is the plain line. So the plain one is the line of scientific, contemplative relationship, and the dotted line is the line of social relations. It means that when you come in the field as an anthropologist or as a sociologist to get the data, you necessarily have to establish some connection with people if you are working in an interpretivism paradigm. So the one line of your relation will be purely social, since you have to establish some relationship between you and your informant, your interlocutor. And the next line, the dotted one, the plain one, is a line that represents your relationship to the object you study as a scientific object. So you not just chatting about how do you feel and what it meant, what you just have said, but you're trying to extract something from the words they use and from the meanings they attach to some actions, words, beliefs, and so on. What's the problem here? The problem is that neither positivism nor interpretivism pay any attention to the how it is going in fact, in real life. So when we study as a students of society, when we study some social group, and we're working within the interpretivism paradigm, what we miss is the actual conditions under which some meanings are attached, or some actions have any meaning at all. So what is missing there, here in realism, is represented as with the letter O, which means the material, intrinsically meaningless objects, whether natural or artificial, or other symbols as before. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that when one social group studies another social group, it should not only be concerned with some particular meanings which the members of the second group attach to their actions and interactions and beliefs and so on. They should be concerned also with the actual conditions under which those meanings and those actions exist and have meaning at all. So this was a little justification about why we need realism in social theory at all, since in positivism and interpretivism are quite bad, since in positivism we don't account for the language character of linguistic character of the group studied, since we think that we study some objectively existing independent of our cognition objects, which might be society. It's well represented in the early works of Durkheim, like in Suicide, where you can see where he used some statistics to see how society works. So now we should proceed to shortly discuss some contemporary branches of realism, not only in social theory, but some branches of realism we should account for if we are to make some realist social science. So the first one is the famous work of Quentin Meillassoux on speculative materialism, which is called After Finitude, and I will briefly discuss what he does there. So the main thing he does is he introduces what he calls correlationism. So correlationism is the group of philosophical systems for which being is nothing but some relation to the world. So being is seen there as some kind of correlation of being itself and something correlated to it. Might be some symbolic forms, maybe it might be cognition, it might be neo-Kantian symbolic forms, or etc. So any kind of correlation is dismissed by Meillassoux. So by which he does it, he just questions the very distinction, Immanuel Kant's distinction of phenomena and noumena. So he says that the very distinction is based upon the statement that things might be otherwise. So if you say that there are phenomena and noumena, this statement is underpinned by the statement that things might be otherwise. And this allows Meillassoux to propose the necessity of contingency as an ontological principle. So why can social theory engage with speculative materialism? I will not go into detail here since we have no time, but I will briefly discuss it. The very his questioning of the distinction of phenomena and noumena is based upon the procedure which I call pseudo-deduction of contingency. Since he tries to subvert Kant's very distinction of phenomena and noumena, but he doesn't say in which domain he says that things might be otherwise. This leads him to mixing up the two domains, the epistemological domain and ontological domain, since he doesn't say where things might be otherwise in our appearance or where. So he doesn't say anything about it. And next, what he does, he uses just George Cantor's theorem of cardinality of sets. This theorem consists of the statement that the set of the subset of some set is bigger of the initial set. I don't know whether have you understood it or not. Maybe if not, I can repeat it. So the George Cantor's theorem of cardinality of sets is about the thing that the set, you have set, so you have subsets of this set. The set of all subsets of this set is much bigger than the initial set of which we have subsets. So this is, am I right?
Yes.
Yes. So so when George Cantor applies this theorem, he says about infinite sets. But what Meillassoux proposes is to account for transfinite sets. So it's not so important now, but I just want to say that what he does with Kant, he just takes Cantor's mathematical theorem of cardinality of sets, it just ontologizes it. So he says that, look guys, we've got some mathematical theorem. Why don't we use it as an ontological principle? So, and this leads him to what Ray Brassier calls the paradox of contingency. Paradox of contingency, wow, Philip Haynes just, okay, nice. The paradox of contingency consists of the thing that if we allow the necessity of contingency, by saying that things might be otherwise, we don't actually know in what domain this was set. Since if we allow that things might be otherwise is the ontological statement, we fall into impossibility of knowledge, since our very statement of things might be otherwise. So the very idea of this statement makes us to fall into impossibility of the very knowledge. And if we allow that things might be otherwise is epistemological statement, it leads us to what Rebers here calls to degrading into idealism. So Mises is accused in some subtle form of idealism, and that's why we can't engage we as a social scientists or social theorists can't engage with speculative materialism. Next, we will briefly discuss Delanda's assemblage theory and why it's so assemblage theory is a theory where assemblages are basic ontological units. They are historically contingent individuals, and they interact with each other and emerge only by exterior relations. The main point of Delanda's assemblage theory is that those assemblages constitute some kind of flat ontology of individuals where all entities are ontologically equal. So there is no hierarchy, no hierarchical levels. They all emerge, but they emerge on a flat surface. Why can't assemblage theory become a universal social ontology? First and foremost, because what Delanda does is just ontologizing dynamic systems theory. He does it after Deleuze. Deleuze made it himself, but Deleuze didn't commit himself to using some dynamic system theoretical definitions in a strict technical sense. He might be using it in metaphorical sense. We don't know it, so we will leave the question to Deleuzians. So what Delanda does in his 2002 book Intensive Science and Virtue Philosophy is he's completely dismissing the metaphorical content of Deleuzian concepts. He tries to give them some precise, mathematically funded and technical definitions, and here he falls full and he just ontologized dynamic system theory. What he does then is, by proposing the assemblages emerging out of interactions with each other, he does just the universalization of exterior relations. He denies interior necessary relations. He says that all relations are contingent. All relations are contingent, and they interact with each other, they cause emergence, and so on. What he does by this is he just ignores transcendental necessity. What I mean by this is that he doesn't see assemblages as a conditions of each other. When he says that, oh look, there is interpersonal network, and then there is organization, and there is a city, and there is a national state, he completely ignores the thought, the idea that in order for organization to be, they should be preceding transcendentally, not logically or chronologically, transcendentally preceding interpersonal network, which consists of people and so on. So by denying transcendental necessity, he neglects ontological dependence. Ontological dependence is that he tries to, is the thesis which one assemblage ontologically depends on another assemblage. As I have said, to have a city, you need to have some interpersonal networks, not vice versa. So the city is not a condition for interpersonal network, but the interpersonal network is a condition for a city. So we arrive at the impossibility of flat emergent ontology, since ontology cannot be at the same time emergent and be flat, since there are relations of ontological dependence and transcendental necessity. One assemblage is a condition for another. So the next and the most elaborated philosophy of social science, I guess, is Roy Pascal's critical realism. And what he does is he asks the ontological questions about conditions of possibility of science, not of conditions of experience as Kant does, but the conditions of science. He asks what the world must be like for science to be possible. He says that he starts from critiquing positivism for its theory of causality, which is purely human. He says that the medium of causal laws cannot be experience itself, since if we allow that, we think that world was made for people, and we commit anthropocentric fallacy. Thus, what Pascal does, he deduces three ontologically distinct levels of reality as a result of transcendental analysis of experience. He says that if experience cannot be a medium of causal laws, there must be some kind of different domain where causal laws reside. Thus, he says that there are domain of empirical, we can immediately experience something. The domain of factual, where something can happen without us registering it. And the domain of real. The domain of real is the domain where the causal mechanisms which are responsible for the things which happen residing. So what's wrong with critical realism then? It seems that critical realism is the most powerful, as for me, the most powerful thing out of the three things which we just discussed, but it has some critical problem. The problem is that it uses lay knowledge as an epistemic proto-exemplar. So Pascal starts by saying that, okay, what the world must be like if science to be possible, and he derives the answer on this question from his lay knowledge. His knowledge, what he does is the illegitimate conversion of implicit epistemological assumptions about the world, like why the natural science works, and he deduces his three ontological domains, and then what he does is he converts the implicit epistemological assumptions into explicit ontological definitions. And he says that, hey guys, I have done it. So here we have some just three distinct ontological domains, and we can work with them, use them in our scientific practice. So the critical realism of Roy Pascal was criticized for mixing up the transcendental and the empirical, by saying that, by using in his transcendental arguments some kind of thing that is social activity itself. So science is a social activity, and he uses it in his transcendental arguments, and by this he naturalizes transcendental arguments, which is the main problem in it. So is there any way out of this cul-de-sac? I think that the first thing we need is the distinction of thought objects and real objects, but not like this, when we have a theory on the side of thought objects and a fact on the side of real objects, since it perverses the actual picture. It does not distinguish the two domains. Instead, we might have this kind of picture where we have theory, empirical, observational, factual knowledge on the side of thought objects, and we have facts as things or states of the world on the side of real objects. We shouldn't think of facts like of propositional knowledge. We should think of facts as a states of the world. This might be quite useful. The shape of social realism to come. So the first, as I have said, is the distinction of objects and concepts. I think it is the most relevant distinction we should have in order to proceed with realist social science. The second one is pretty much based upon critical realism, and it's the explanation of causal mechanisms. So what we as a social scientists might do is to explain causality, to explain how things happen, what comes them to happen. So we should search for some governing mechanisms, or we might use another word if you don't like mechanism, some kind of cause which causes other causes to produce some effects. Like this is a picture drawn from Andrew Sayers' book Method in Social Science, where he says that how we might proceed with social explanation. So here we have an object X having structure S. This object X necessarily possesses causal powers P1, P2, P3, and so on, and liabilities. So this object X having some causal powers under specific conditions, which are represented by C1, C2, C, and so on, produce some concrete particular effects, like E1 is not activated, hence producing no change, produce change of another type. So the procedure we are to make is what Pascal calls retroducing. So we might go from effects to causes by searching for some particular conditions under which some outcomes happen, and then we proceed by identifying some concrete causal powers which have this object and some concrete particular structure with which this object has. So the shape of social realism to come. So the next idea is, as I think, we need stratified social ontology, Pace Delanda. So in order to completely, as I think, explain some phenomena, we should address it in three distinct ontological levels. So the level of structure, which is the level studied, the underlying level of elements, and the overlying level of context. This is the idea of Thomas Brante, not mine. So this is just a suggestion how we might proceed while doing social science. So in order to completely explain something, we should address it in three distinct ontological domains. So the next crucial thing, I guess, is the accounting for complex causality. So accounting that we might have not only one mechanism responsible for some effects. We might have more than one, we might have many mechanisms, and the complexity of this causality is that is to account for as much as we can possible causes. So, and the last statement which I want to propose is less foundationalism, more fallibilism. So what does it mean? It means that we shouldn't account for, in Pascalian style, that there are some distinct ontological domains which might govern our study, but we should treat knowledge as revisable, as criticable, and knowledge as some social activity which we can engage in. That's all. Thank you very much. Так, any questions?